They say every neighborhood has that house. The one nobody mows, the one with curtains always drawn, the one where, no matter the time of day, the shadows seem too thick, too alive. For us, that house was across the street, number 237 on Juniper Lane. When I was 10, I swore I saw someone watching me from the upstairs window, a pale shape, unmoving, just watching. I remember freezing in the middle of the street with my bike, goosebumps crawling over my arms like fire ants. My mom told me I was imagining things. Old Miss Whitaker doesn't even go upstairs, she said. She's just a lonely woman with arthritis. But I knew what I saw. Miss Whitaker rarely came outside. When she did, her movements were stiff and twitchy, like her body didn't quite belong to her. She wore a faded blue bathrobe even in summer, and carried something in her arms, always wrapped in a small pink baby blanket. We all thought it was a dog. It wasn't. She died on a Thursday. I remember the silence when the ambulance pulled away. No siren, no urgency, just a slow crawl into death, as if the house had been waiting patiently to be alone again. A few weeks later, my mom got a call from the realtor handling Miss Whitaker's estate. They were doing cleanup, and since we lived across the street, she was asked to walk through the house and help identify anything that could be donated. I begged to stay home. She made me go. I wish I had screamed louder. The inside of that house smelled like wet soil and copper. Not mildew, not rust. Something else. Something that clung to your skin and made your stomach roll. There were porcelain dolls on every shelf, hundreds maybe. All staring, all blank-faced. Some were chipped, others had cracked eyes or missing limbs. And in the center of the living room was that blanket. The pink one, sitting neatly folded on a wooden rocking chair. But what I remember most was the doll, that wasn't like the others. It was propped alone in a small armchair by the window facing the street. Black hair tangled, eyes too glassy. Its dress was deep red velvet stitched by hand. But what made me stop, what froze me, was its face. It looked like a real child, too real. The skin was textured, the eyelashes were actual strands. And, worst of all, the eyes followed you, not in the usual way dolls seem to do. No, this was different. This doll was watching. I backed away. I didn't say a word. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house sounded sharper, more intentional. At around 3 a.m., I heard a soft tapping. Just once. Then again, it was coming from my window. I live on the second floor. I pulled the curtain aside with shaking fingers, expecting to see a tree branch or maybe just the wind playing tricks on me, but there was nothing. Just the street. Empty. Except there was a shape, a silhouette, sitting in the middle of the road. It looked like a child, small frame. Still, perfectly upright, facing my house. Facing me. I didn't sleep that night. And the next morning, the blanket from Miss Whitaker's house, and the pink one, was folded neatly on my front porch. We never brought it home, and I never touched it. The blanket sat there for 2 full days. My mom thought someone was playing a prank, maybe one of the neighborhood kids. She picked it up with 2 fingers, like it might bite her, and stuffed it into the garbage bin. That night, I woke up to the sound of breathing. It wasn't mine, it was ragged, shallow, wet, coming from just beyond the foot of my bed. I froze. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. You know how sometimes your brain tells you something's wrong before your body catches up? That primal animal terror? That's what I felt, like prey. The moonlight slipped through my curtains, casting soft silver lines across the room. And in that light, I saw it. The doll, sitting at the foot of my bed. Same red velvet dress. Same black hair. Same impossibly human face. I shut my eyes. I bit down on my own fist to keep from screaming. When I opened them again, it was gone. The next morning, I found tiny footprints on my floor. Not muddy, not dirty, just impressions. As if someone had walked across my room barefoot on soft sand, and the shape had somehow stuck to the hardwood. I tried to tell my mom. She laughed it off, told me to stop watching scary movies. But I wasn't sleeping. I was unraveling. Every night, I'd hear the breathing, then the whispering. It didn't speak like a child. It sounded older, ancient, words that scratched the back of my skull but made no sense, like they were meant to be forgotten. I moved into my mom's room. She let me sleep there 2 nights before she got annoyed. On the 3rd night, I went back to my own bed, and that's when it all came undone. I woke up paralyzed. I couldn't move and couldn't scream. Only my eyes worked, and through the blur of my tears, I saw her again. Not the doll. Her. A woman hunched over my chest, skin pale like candle wax, eyes hollow and bottomless. And in her arms, the doll, clutched like an infant, rocked slowly. She stared at me, head tilted too far, neck cracked like a broken stick. Her lips didn't move, but I heard her. She likes your bed. The next thing I remember is waking up on the floor, my voice hoarse from screaming. My mom stood in the doorway, pale, clutching a phone. She never told me what she saw when she walked in. We moved out 2 days later. Months passed. New town, new school, therapy sessions every week. My mom refused to talk about what happened, and I tried to forget. But you don't forget things like that, you just bury them deep. Years later, I came across an article online. It was about the house on Juniper Lane, number 237. The headline read, "New owners find hidden room in attic, dozens of infant dresses and homemade dolls inside." One photo showed a dusty trunk opened wide. Inside were dozens of tiny velvet dresses, all red, all stitched by hand. And in the corner of the room, half-shadowed, sat her. The same doll, same black hair, same eyes. Watching. That night I dreamed. I was back in that house, only this time I wasn't a child, and she wasn't waiting. She was walking, closer, and in her hands, she held a blanket, pink, folded, for me. There's something deeply wrong about silence. Not the kind you get in the woods or late at night when the city finally sleeps. I'm talking about a different kind of silence. One that presses against your ears. That kind that feels like it's waiting for something. That was the silence in apartment 304. I live in a mid-sized complex in Eugene, Oregon. Nothing fancy. Thin walls, shitty plumbing, neighbors you never really talk to unless someone's parked in your spot. But apartment 304, that place was different. It belonged to Mr. Fletcher, quiet guy, maybe mid-60s. Retired, I think. Lived alone. Didn't say much besides the occasional grunt if you held the elevator. But every night, at exactly 9:15 p.m., you'd hear the same thing. The metallic creak of his old recliner, and the muffled drone of whatever boring documentary he had playing on TV. Same routine, always. Until one Tuesday, the sound stopped. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe he fell asleep early. Maybe he went to visit family. But after 3 days, 3 long, heavy, silent days, the smell started. It wasn't strong at first, just a faint, sweet rot that clung to the hallway like bad breath. I tried to tell myself it was the trash chute or maybe something spilled in the carpet, but by day 5 it was unmistakable. That thick, sickening stench that hits you in the back of your throat and stays there. Someone called management. They knocked. No answer. They knocked again. Still nothing. That's when they called the police. I stood in the hallway with a couple of nosy neighbors as the cops jimmied the door open. The moment it cracked, just an inch, the smell poured out like it had been waiting. The look on the officer's face was enough. He didn't even need to say it. Mr. Fletcher was dead. We all assumed it had been days, maybe a week. It made sense. No movement, no sounds, the smell. It lined up. But that's where it gets fucked up. Because I saw Mr. Fletcher. Yesterday. I swear to God. I was taking out my trash, and he passed me in the stairwell. Didn't say a word. Just walked slowly up the stairs like he always did, one hand on the railing. Same beige cardigan, same sagging posture, same tired look. I even nodded at him, and he nodded back. I told the officers. They looked at each other like I'd hit my head. "Ma'am," one of them said gently, "the body's been dead for at least 5 days. There's no way you saw him yesterday." But I did. That night I couldn't sleep. My brain kept looping that moment on the stairs. The way his feet had barely made a sound. The way he didn't seem to blink. The way his eyes looked slightly sunken. Around 2 a.m., I got up for water. My hallway was dark. Only the soft blue nightlight from the outlet kept it from being pitch black, and then I heard it. The sound of a recliner creaking from upstairs. Apartment 304. I stopped breathing. It was the exact sound, same as always. Creak. Pause. Creak again. And then the low, warbling sound of a television. Something grainy and distorted, like a voice buried underwater. But that place was sealed. Empty. I tiptoed toward the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was dead. Still. And then, bang. A sharp, heavy thud from right above me. Something had fallen. I jumped back. My heart was pounding like a war drum. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up with the lights on, every muscle tensed for something. I don't even know what. The next morning, I told the building manager what I'd heard. He brushed it off. "You're probably just shaken. Things like this can mess with your head." But he looked pale, like he'd heard it too. That evening, I decided to try and prove I wasn't going insane. I went up to the 3rd floor. Apartment 304's door was locked. Yellow police tape fluttered at the edges, barely clinging to the frame. But something about the air felt wrong, heavy. Still, I pressed my ear to the door. Silence. Then, ever so faintly, breathing, raspy, guttural. Right on the other side of the door. I stumbled back from the door like it had burned me. That breathing wasn't distant, it was close, right there. As if someone was standing just inside the door, mouth pressed to the wood. I didn't tell anyone. What was I supposed to say? "Hey, I think the corpse upstairs is still breathing." So I tried to convince myself it was the pipes or wind or trauma. Anything but what my gut was screaming. But that night I couldn't help myself. At 9:15 p.m., exactly, I muted my TV and listened. Kriak, the recliner. Then, the static hum of a television. Then, footsteps. Heavy, slow footsteps, pacing. Directly above me. I grabbed a broomstick and tapped the ceiling. Not aggressively, just to see if the noise would stop. It didn't. In fact, it answered. 3 knocks. Deliberate. I felt my stomach twist. That was the last straw. I packed a bag, grabbed my keys, and bolted out of the apartment. I was halfway to the stairwell when the elevator dinged behind me. I turned around. It opened. Empty. Except, it wasn't. There was someone standing just out of sight in the corner. A shape, dark, unmoving. I didn't wait to see what it was. I ran down the stairs 3 steps at a time all the way to the lobby. I spent the night at a 24-hour diner. Didn't sleep. Just stared at the salt shaker for hours. When I came back the next day, the manager caught me as I was walking in. "Hey," he said nervously, "you're not going to believe this." I didn't want to hear it. I already didn't believe it. He continued anyway. "They went into 304 this morning to remove Mr. Fletcher's things. But the body—" "What about it?" I asked. His eyes shifted. "It's gone. Gone. Vanished. No sign of forced entry. No blood. No mess. Just an empty recliner facing the static screen. They're calling it a mix-up, saying maybe the coroner already moved the body and forgot to log it. Some paperwork error. But they're wrong, because that night, and I swear to you, I saw him again. Not in the hallway. In my apartment. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of whispering, not clear words. Just soft, wet syllables being breathed into my ear. When I sat up, my room was dark. But there was a shape in the chair by my window. Not moving, not even breathing. Just watching. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. My throat was locked. My body frozen. All I could do was stare back at the silhouette in the chair. And then, it stood up. No sound, no effort. Just rose, like something weightless. Inhuman. As it stepped toward me, the shadows peeled back just enough to see his face. It was Fletcher, but it wasn't. His mouth hung open too wide. His eyes were gone. Just dark sunken pits leaking something thick and black down his cheeks. He leaned over me, impossibly slow, his jaw trembling like he was trying to form words he hadn't used in decades. And then finally, he whispered, "I never left." I blacked out. When I came to, it was morning. The room was empty. Chair undisturbed. No sign anyone had been there. But something had changed. There's this smell now. Faint. Like old meat and mildew. And the recliner in my living room, it creaks every night at exactly 9:15 p.m., and I don't own a recliner. There's a special kind of dread that settles in your bones when someone watches you, and you don't know who they are, not just passing glances or weird looks from strangers. I mean real, soul-piercing observation. The kind that makes your skin crawl before your brain even registers danger. That's exactly what started happening the day I moved into the new apartment. It was supposed to be a fresh start. I just left a toxic relationship, packed what little I owned into a U-Haul, and drove across 3 states to Portland, Maine. Found a studio above a small row of businesses. Quiet, affordable, anonymous. Perfect. At first, everything was fine. The space was old, but cozy. Hardwood floors, a big bay window, and creaky stairs that gave it some charm. The landlord, Mrs. Rutledge, was in her 80s and half blind, but sweet in that pie on the windowsill kind of way. The only strange thing was the window across the alley. Directly across from mine, maybe 20 feet apart, was another window. Same size, same height. But the apartment it belonged to always had the blinds drawn, except at night. That's when they opened. It started the second night. I was brushing my teeth, and as I passed the window, something caught my eye. A dim light. Movement. I glanced across the alley and froze. The blinds were up. Someone was standing there, just standing in the dark. No lamp, no TV, just the faint amber glow of a hallway bulb behind them. Their body was silhouetted, featureless, still, except for the unmistakable shape of a head tilted slightly, watching me. I turned off the light, stepped back and waited. After a few seconds, I peeked again. Still there. Still watching. I tried to shake it off. Maybe they were curious. Maybe just a harmless weirdo. I shut the curtains tight and went to bed, but the next night, same thing. And the night after that, always around the same time, between 10 and 11 p.m., the figure would appear, standing perfectly still, staring directly at my window, never moving, never speaking. I stopped opening the curtains altogether, but that didn't stop them. I started hearing sounds. Light taps on the window pane, from the outside, 3 stories up, scraping noises like nails dragged slowly along the glass. One night I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, convinced someone had whispered my name. I thought maybe I was losing it. Trauma, stress, maybe some leftover paranoia from the breakup. So I asked Mrs. Rutledge about the apartment across the alley. She looked at me strangely. "Honey," she said, squinting like she wasn't sure if she'd heard right. "There's no tenant in that unit. Hasn't been one for years." I laughed. "I see someone there every night." Her expression changed. Her jaw twitched like she was forcing it not to fall open. "You shouldn't be seeing anyone," she muttered almost to herself. "Not there." I pressed her for more, but she changed the subject. Asked if I wanted cookies. Like my question had never happened. That night I left the curtains closed, but the tapping came anyway. Only this time, it wasn't the window, it was the door. 3 gentle knocks, almost polite. At 2:17 a.m. I held my breath and crept toward it. No peephole. I pressed my ear against the wood. Nothing. Then suddenly, a faint whisper. "I see you." I fell backward, heart hammering in my chest. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. I just stared at the door until the sky began to lighten. The next day I had the locks changed, bolted the windows, pushed my couch against the door. It felt stupid, but I couldn't shake the fear. I called the cops, told them someone was harassing me. They found nothing. No footprints, no signs of forced entry. They said maybe I was dreaming, hallucinating. But that night the blinds across the alley were open again. And this time, the figure waved. Slowly, like it had all the time in the world. That's when I knew. This wasn't a person. This wasn't human. I didn't eat the next day. Couldn't. My stomach felt like it was tied in knots and dipped in ice water. I kept thinking about that wave. The way it moved, slow, deliberate, like a greeting or a warning. That night, I taped black trash, bags over the windows, every inch, duct taped the seams. I left the lights on in every room, kept my phone charged and close. But the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it got worse. I could feel it on the other side of the wall. That pressure, like the air was too thick, like something massive and unseen was leaning against the building just outside. Then the whispers started again. Only this time they weren't coming from the window. They were inside, in my walls. Faint, overlapping voices, speaking too fast and too many at once to understand. It was like hundreds of mouths whispering prayers backward. My ears rang, my nose bled, and I started sobbing without even realizing it. I wanted to leave. Just grab my keys and run. But I couldn't. My body wouldn't move. Something was holding me in place. I sat frozen on my bed for what felt like hours, my arms numb, the whispers scraping at the inside of my skull. I don't remember falling asleep, just darkness swallowing me. When I woke up, it was still night, and the trash bags on the windows were gone, torn off, neatly. The blinds were wide open, and across the alley, the opposite apartment was lit, up like a stage, brighter than ever before. And this time I saw it clearly. There wasn't one figure in the window. There were many, dozens, all standing motionless in the cramped little space, shoulder to shoulder, faces turned toward me. Every single one smiling, but their faces, God, their faces, they weren't right. They looked melted, hollowed, as if someone had carved away everything human and left only skin stretched over grins too wide and eyes too dark. I blinked, and they were closer. Not in the alley, not in the window, in my apartment, just standing in my kitchen. Silent. I tried to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. My voice was gone. I backed away slowly, breath shallow, and bumped into something cold behind me. It grabbed my hand. I turned. He was standing there. The first figure. The one who had watched me for nights. I could see him now, clearly, up close. His skin was paper thin, veins black and moving beneath the surface like worms. His mouth was stitched into a jagged smile with something that looked like hair, and from the hole where his left eye should have been, something watched me. It leaned close, jaw twitching, and whispered, "You let us in." The walls around me began to pulse, bleed. The air filled with the sound of hundreds of whispering mouths. I collapsed. Everything flickered, the lights, my thoughts, time itself. When I came to, I was alone. Morning light poured in like nothing had ever happened. My apartment was clean, quiet, ordinary, but I was not the same, because I still see them, everywhere, in mirrors, in reflections that don't move when I do, in the faces of strangers who hold eye contact just a second too long. They're waiting, and every night at 10:47 p.m., I hear the knock on the window again. Just one, gentle, like a reminder, like a promise they're still here, and next time I don't think they're going to ask. I used to think the scariest thing in the world was being alone. I was wrong. What's truly terrifying is thinking you're alone and realizing, too late, that you never were. It started a few months ago, after I moved to a quiet little neighborhood in upstate New York. I'd just gotten out of grad school, landed a remote job, and found a cheap rental house on the edge of a forest. It was small, but charming. Brick exterior, ivy crawling up the sides, a crooked chimney that gave it character. The kind of place you imagine writing a novel in. My closest neighbor, James, lived across the street. Maybe late 30s, quiet, lived, alone. Wore the same navy hoodie every day and smoked on his porch like it was a religion. He never spoke unless spoken to, just nodded. But every time I passed him, I felt his eyes on me. Not like he was admiring, more like studying. I tried not to read into it. People in small towns are just weird sometimes, I told myself. Probably lonely. But then I started noticing things. Subtle at first. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and feel like someone had been in my room. No sounds, no movement, just this impression in the air. Like the room was holding its breath. Then I started misplacing things. Nothing major. A mug I could have sworn I left in the sink showing up in the bathroom. Lights I didn't remember turning on. Once I found my laptop open, the screen still, glowing, a blank document on the screen with a single line typed, "I like watching you sleep." I laughed it off. Told myself it was a prank, maybe a glitch. Until the lock started changing. I'd come home from a walk and find the deadbolt turned the opposite way. Once the key didn't work at all. I had to call a locksmith. He couldn't explain it. Said the lock had been gutted and reset from the inside. Still, I tried to rationalize it. I didn't want to be the paranoid woman calling the cops over every creak. But one night, I couldn't pretend anymore. It was about 2 a.m. I was in bed, half asleep, when I heard the front door open. Not creak, not rattle, open. Slow and deliberate, like someone had used a key. I froze. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Just listened. Heavy footsteps padded through the living room. Across the hardwood. Slow. Unhurried. Whoever it was wasn't trying to be quiet. They were exploring. I reached for my phone, but it wasn't on the nightstand. Gone. The footsteps moved toward the kitchen, then the bathroom, then silence. I waited and waited. After what felt like hours, I crept out of bed, gripping a pair of scissors like a weapon. I checked every room, flicked on every light. Nothing. No one. But on the floor in front of my bedroom door was a single item that didn't belong to me. A crumpled, sweaty navy blue hoodie. The same kind James always wore. I dropped it and backed away, shaking. The next morning, I went across the street to confront him. His house was locked, windows dark. I knocked. No answer. I knocked harder. Finally, an older man opened the door, someone I'd never seen before. "Can I help you?" "Where's James?" He frowned. "James? The guy who lives here?" He hesitated. "I bought this place 3 weeks ago, moved in last weekend. The old tenant was an older lady, lived here for years, passed away in hospice." I just stared at him. That night I dug through my security camera footage, a cheap webcam I'd set up above the front door when I moved in. I scrolled through the recordings from the past month. James was never there. Not once. But every night, at exactly 3:03 a.m. The same frame appeared, a figure in a navy hoodie standing in the middle of my front yard, staring directly at the camera. Never moving, never approaching, just watching. And the worst part? His face was blurred, not by the camera, by something else. Like his face didn't want to be remembered. I've stopped sleeping since then, because every night the door opens again. And every morning, something is moved. Something small, something intimate, my toothbrush facing the opposite direction, my shoes laced instead of unlaced. The sheets pulled tightly around me, even if I know I kicked them off in fear. He's still here. I don't know how. I don't know what he is anymore. But I know this. I was never alone. And neither are you. The next night I left all the lights on. I stacked chairs against the doors, wedged knives between the window frames, left a hammer under my pillow. I didn't care if I sounded crazy anymore. I needed to know I could protect myself. But it didn't matter. At exactly 3:03 a.m. the lights flickered off. Not just dimmed, they died all at once, like something had sucked the electricity out of the walls. I stayed frozen in bed, heart punching my ribs. The silence in the house was so deep it rang in my ears. Then the front door opened again. I heard it as clearly as I hear my own breath now. The click of the deadbolt turning, the slow creak of wood. Footsteps, not rushed, not cautious, confident. Closer, this time. I held the hammer, every muscle in my body locked in panic. But the steps didn't head toward the kitchen, or bathroom, or hallway. They walked directly to my bedroom door, and stopped. I stared at the doorknob, barely lit by the moonlight. It twitched, turned halfway, then stopped. He wasn't coming in. He didn't need to. The doorknob released, and something slid under the door. A photograph. I stared at it, breath shaking. It was me, asleep in bed. Last night's clothes. Same blanket, same position, taken from inches away. The photo was still warm. I screamed. I ran outside in my pajamas, barefoot, into the middle of the road, screaming for help. I didn't care who heard me. That's when I saw the house across the street. James's house. The man who said he'd just moved in wasn't there. The porch light was off. The windows were boarded up, not covered, nailed shut. There was no sign of anyone ever living there. I walked closer, shaking, and pressed my face to a crack in the boards. And inside was something impossible. The room was filled with hundreds of photographs of me, sleeping, eating, showering, typing, staring blankly at a screen, taped to the walls, hanging from strings, pinned to mannequins with missing faces. In the center of the room, nailed to the floor, was a rotting mattress with a navy hoodie folded neatly on top, and next to it, my toothbrush, my comb, my hair. He'd been living in that house the whole time, alone, watching me, collecting me. I backed away, trembling, and turned to run, and he was behind me, not 6 feet away, still wearing that hoodie. Only now, I could see his face, and I wished I hadn't. It wasn't blurred anymore. It was mine, my exact face. Down to the scar on my chin and the gap in my front teeth, but twisted. Wrong. Like someone had tried to recreate me from memory and failed. He smiled, and, in that voice that sounded like static and screaming layered together, he whispered, "I just want to live inside you." I blacked out. I woke up in the hospital 2 days later. The doctor said I was found screaming in the street, covered in blood that wasn't mine. They think it was a psychotic break. But I know better, because I still hear him sometimes. Behind me, breathing in sync with me, whispering at night when I close my eyes, and this morning, when I looked in the mirror, just for a second, my reflection didn't blink when I did. You ever get that feeling someone's watching you? Not in the fun, flirty way. I mean the cold, bone-deep certainty that something you can't see is staring straight through your skin. I used to laugh that stuff off. Until the night I looked out my window and saw someone watching me from inside my own house. I had just moved to Oregon City, a quiet town buried in pine forests and fog, the kind of place where nothing ever happens. And that's exactly why I picked it. I'd been through a brutal breakup, needed a clean slate, and found a 2-story rental house on the edge of town that was almost too good to be true. Cheap, secluded, with a backyard that melted straight into the woods. The real estate agent said the last owner was an older man who passed away. No drama, no history. I didn't ask more questions. I should have. The first few nights were peaceful. I unpacked, painted, even let myself believe I could start fresh here. There was a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. Then, around the 5th night, things shifted. It started with the sound of footsteps on the 2nd floor. At first I told myself it was the old pipes or maybe the house settling. But they didn't sound like creaks or groans. They sounded rhythmic, measured, like someone pacing. I live alone. I remember standing at the bottom of the stairs holding my breath, listening to the faint thump of footsteps above me, back and forth, back and forth. When I finally worked up the courage to go up, the hallway was dark. The rooms were empty. Nothing out of place except one thing. The attic door, a square panel in the ceiling, was slightly open. Just an inch. I'd never noticed it before. I couldn't explain why, but I didn't touch it. I backed away slowly and slept on the couch that night with every light on. That's when I started noticing things being moved. Nothing obvious, just wrong enough to make me question myself. The remote on the wrong side of the coffee table, the fridge door slightly ajar when I hadn't opened it, my toothbrush wet when I hadn't brushed my teeth, and the worst, the smell. Some nights, the whole house would fill with this thick, rotten stench. Like wet wood, mold, and something dead. It always came from upstairs. I called pest control. They found nothing. I bought cameras, motion sensors, even nailed the attic door shut. But every morning, it was open again. Then came the voices. Soft, whispering. They didn't speak in words and was more like a low hiss behind my ears, like someone muttering right into my brain. I started locking every door and window. I barely slept. I barely ate. I was unraveling. And then, the window thing happened. It was 2:17 a.m. I remember the exact time because I looked at my phone the second my blood turned cold. I had been trying to sleep when something made me look toward the window across the room. Second story, facing the woods. There was a face in it, but not outside looking in. Inside, from behind the glass, watching me. I screamed, grabbed a knife, ran to the window. There was no one there, but on the glass were 2 greasy handprints on the inside. And that's when I realized this wasn't some stranger breaking in. They never left. They'd been here the whole time. Somewhere, inside this house, living in the crawl spaces, or the attic, or maybe even under the floors. And every night, they were getting braver. I stopped sleeping. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt them, breathing in sync with me, shifting in the walls. Like the house had veins and something was crawling through them. I hired a contractor, told him I thought there were animals in the attic. He brought in a crew, tore the place apart. But when they pulled down the attic panels, they found something that wasn't animal. They found clothing, stacks of it, folded neatly, most of it mine, and in the far corner, surrounded by torn insulation and moldy blankets, was a small hollowed-out space in the beams, just big enough for someone to crawl inside. Whoever had been living there hadn't just been hiding. They'd been studying me, watching me breathe, eat, cry, sleep. Inside that crawl space, they found a journal. At least that's what they called it. To me, it looked more like worship. Pages filled with sketches of my face, drawings of my bedroom from different angles. Dozens of pages with the words, "You are mine," written over and over again, getting shakier and more frantic near the end. One entry was dated 3 days before. "Soon she'll be ready. Soon I can wear her completely." I threw up. I moved out that night. Didn't even pack. I stayed in a motel 3 towns over, changed my number, never looked back. I tried to rebuild my life, told myself it was over, that it was just some deranged squatter, until last week. I was at the grocery store, just a regular Tuesday, and I felt it again, that cold, electric feeling on the back of my neck, the one that says, "You're being watched." I turned, heart thudding. A man was standing at the end of the aisle, wearing a hoodie, shoulders hunched, face hidden. But there was something off about him. The way he tilted his head, the way his hands twitched slightly, like he was mimicking my movements. I left everything in the cart and ran out. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept checking every window, every door, and just before dawn I got a call. No caller ID, just breathing. Then a whisper. "I found you again." I went completely numb. I moved again the next day. New town, new state, cameras in every corner, panic, alarms under my bed. But 2 nights ago, I woke up to the smell. That same foul, rotten stench, crawling up from the vents like a ghost I couldn't shake. And last night, I heard scratching inside the walls, long, deliberate scratches, like fingernails tracing the blueprint of the house. And this morning, when I opened my closet, all my clothes were gone, replaced with his hoodie, the same one from the attic. Still warm, still damp. I swear I locked every door, every window. But it doesn't matter. He always finds a way in, because he doesn't want to hurt me. He wants to be me. And one day, I know I'll wake up, look in the mirror, and the reflection staring back at me won't blink because it won't be me anymore. If you made it this far, you're braver than most. If these stories chilled you even a little, go ahead and hit that like button. It really helps me bring you more horror, more darkness, and more truth. Share this video with someone who thinks they're not afraid of the dark, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Join us. There's always another story waiting, and right now, the one playing on your screen might just be the scariest of them all. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.